Welcome to the second part of the tutorial on generating levels at runtime for multiplayer games. In the first part, we created a basic UI system that allowed players to choose a level from a menu. Then I made some changes to the level layout, adding triggers, generators, and a function to handle trigger overlaps. If you haven't watched the first part yet, I highly recommend checking that out before continuing this video. The last change I made in the part 1 was adding another city option to the first level, and 2 different lake options for the third level. Now let's move on and create the necessary functions for the player controller. As you saw in the bottom right corner, that function was running on the server, but things like UI only happen on the client side. To handle this, we need a function that runs only on the client version of the player controller. You just need to change the replication mode to run on owning clients. Since it's crucial for this to happen, we'll make it reliable so that even in a busy network, this function is guaranteed to be called. For its input, first we need the generator. And then we need levels and seeds as separate arrays, as we can't pass tmap in a network. Let's promote the generator to a variable so we can keep track of which one should build the level. I'll create a new function to handle UI creation, keeping the event graph clean. Let's set up the necessary inputs for this function. All we need as inputs for this function is the array of the levels and seeds. Add the create widget node and select our level selector UMG. We don't need to set the owning player. There seems to be a bug where the setting causes the UI to stop working. Optionally, you can store the widget so you can remove it from the screen after a level is selected, though you can handle this directly in the widget class. After that, we need to add the widget to the viewport so it becomes visible to the player. Don't forget to enable the mouse cursor as well. Finally, set the input mode to game and UI, although I accidentally chose the wrong node when recording the video. The player controller is this class itself, and the widget is the menu we just created. Next, let's go to the menu class. We don't need to print the selected level anymore, and create an event dispatcher so we can bind a function to it. There are 2 inputs for this dispatcher, the selected level and its seed. We'll call the event dispatcher, passing the selected level name and seed as inputs. Now let's head back to the player controller class and bind a function to the event dispatcher we just created. I'll give this function a name and we can start adding some code to it. First, I want to remove the menu from the screen. Actually, let's move that step to the second action. For the first action, we'll ask the server to generate the level. Since we're currently on the client side, to switch back to the server side, we need to create a server function. This function should be set to run on server and also marked as reliable. For the server function, we'll need the generator class as its input. Followed by the collection, we'll handle that in just a moment. And finally, the seed. Now, let's go back to the previous function and call this server function. We can use the stored generator and pass the seed from the input. To handle the collection selection, I want to create another function. This one can be marked as pure, so we don't need an execution wire. And it can be also const, since we won't be writing any variables. For this new function, we'll need to pass the selected level name as the input. As the output, we'll return the collection. The first step is to convert the level name to a string, so we can run more functions on it. If you don't see the collections listed on the output node, just click the settings button and enable show plugin content. I'm going to use the Kingdom collection as my base, since it comes with different biomes and has a basic collection setup ready to use. So let me copy that into a new folder. First, I'll create the city collection. All I need to do is remove the unwanted options, and it will automatically update the conditions for the remaining ones. Next, I'll create another collection for the jungle. I'll increase the tree mesh weight so we can see more trees in the level. Finally, for the lake collection, I'll keep all the river options as they are. Now that our collections are ready, let's check the requested level name. We'll use the contains function to see if the level name includes a specific word, ignoring the number at the end of the name. I'll start by checking if the level contains the word city. If it does, we can return the city collection. Next, I'll check for the word jungle, and if true, I'll return the jungle collection. And the final level type we have is the lake. Lastly, if no match is found, we'll return the jungle collection by default. Now back to the previous function. Let's connect this to the collection input node. And don't forget to handle the second part of the function. After removing the menu, we need to switch the input back to game only. And hide the mouse cursor. Now that we've switched to the server version of the controller, let's start by validating the generator and the collection. Next, we'll set the collection on the generator, followed by initializing it. Make sure to enable force so everything resets properly. Finally, we can call the generate map function, connect the seed, and make sure to generate the entire map. Back in the level blueprint, let's call the select level function to kick things off. We can easily convert a T-map to arrays by using the getKeys and getValues functions. The generator also comes from the input. Let's quickly double check everything. When we call this function, we transition from the server side to the client side. We need to call the level selector widget, and everything looks good. Now we're ready to test. Click on the three dot menu, increase the player count, and set the net mode to listen server. The menu opens but the player keeps running. That's because the input mode needs to be set to both game and UI. Once that's fixed, the problem is resolved. Now if I move the server player to that location, we won't see the menu pop up since it was already triggered by the first player to reach it. Let me select city on the client. And as you can see, the level is generated for both players. For the next puzzle, I'll test it with the other player. The menu is visible, and if I move the second player to the location, the menu won't show up for them. This time, I'll choose jungle. And again, both players get the same map. Now let's build the last puzzle. The generator is a little low, so water isn't visible, but everything works great overall. I don't want to stop here because we can make our logic even better. There is a situation where a client might join the game after the level has already been generated. In that case, we'll need an extra step to load the level for them too. This step is optional, so only add it if you think this scenario could happen in your game. Open the third-person GameMode class. It contains a function called onPostLogin, which gets triggered every time a player joins the server. First, we'll check how many players are in the game. If there is only one, I want to store that player as a reference so it can be used for any players that join later. We can cast it directly to our custom player controller class, avoiding the need to cast it repeatedly. I call the variable first PC. Next, go back to the player controller class and create a new event. Now we need to get all the generators in the level. This event will loop through each generator in the level. And then call the late client update function on each of them. Since we are calling this from the game mode and we are currently on the server side, it runs on the server, but to ensure it never runs on the client, I'll change the replication mode to run on server. It's important to note that if you call the late client update function from the client, it won't work. Now go back to the game mode and call this function. We can also add an input to this event to identify which player controller is calling it. And ignore the call if it comes from the first stored player controller. The safest place to call this function is within the character class, because we need to ensure the level is fully loaded. Open the character class and locate its begin play event. We can't call this from the player controller because the controller loads before the level is ready. To maintain the input setup, I'll add a sequence node. To ensure the level is fully loaded, I also include a delay here. Since this call originates on both sides, but I want to use the client version and then we can pass it to the server, because the game mode only exists on the server. Also, we need to add the player controller as input to the function. This event must be set to run on server and marked as reliable to ensure it's processed even in busy network conditions. From the client side, we'll call this function. First, we need to get the controller of this class and cast it to our custom player controller so that we can pass it to the function on the server. Now that we are on the server, we have access to the GameMode class. First, we need to cast it to our custom GameMode class. And then we can call our update level function. I'll rename that function to map update, so we have consistent naming across all functions. This time, I want to test the project outside of the Unreal editor using a dedicated server and a standalone version of the project. To do this, we'll first go into the project settings and set the default server map to the current level. Let me run the dedicated server. Our server is ready. Now I'll add the first client. Imagine he's playing alone, building the first puzzle. Now that the second client joins, initially the generated level wasn't loaded for the new player. But after the delay we added, the level was successfully updated for the second player. I hope this video was helpful. Be sure to check out my Monday Market Day program, where I review marketplace assets every week. I am also thinking of updating the format to fit the Fab platform. Stay tuned.